Here's Dr. Scott Schachter from the Ocular Service Academy with your industry spotlight.
So Sonja, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a couple of research papers that are ahead of publication that we're going to talk about with your unique technology. Why don't you start us off by talking about your ESSENCE study, which was looking at cyclosporine, I believe.
Thank you. Yes, we are very proud of the recognition of our work by Cornea accepting these papers. And I think that this highly ranked journal also recognized the quality of the studies as well as the outcomes, because in both trials we could show that our treatments improved the signs and symptoms of dry eye disease. And in particular, for this success, I believe it's important to define the population right. And for CyclASol, it's a cyclosporine A containing product. We believe that predominant aqueous deficient dry eye patients are the target population. With that, we designed a study to find patients which are primarily aqueous deficient. And this trial showed that we could improve signs and symptoms, and the effect started really early. So we could see improvement in total corneal staining, our primary endpoint, already at 2 weeks. And the effect was maintained throughout the study for 3 months.
Well, I noticed corneal staining for clinical signs and OSDI for symptoms were two of the endpoints you looked at. And a passion of mine, driven by Dr. S. Nakpak at Johns Hopkins, I met with her last summer in Washington, D.C., and it was an epiphany to me to listen to her talk about Sjogren's patients and corneal staining and how it related to quality of life issues, in particular, reading speed. And so it really got my attention that reading speed was something that you looked at in your study, and you found what?
Yeah, so we worked together with Esen Akpak, and that was one of our idea, because we targeted patients with higher level of staining to see if our treatment could improve visual function, because we believe that visual function is really an under-recognized problem in dry eye. And we used reading speed as a surrogate for visual function. And the outcome was really interesting, because we could correlate reading speed to corneal staining. So the higher the level in corneal staining was, the lower the reading speed. And what was really intriguing, that during therapy, we could increase reading speed. So potentially the result in the reduction of corneal staining.
Yeah, very profound to be able to relate slit lamp findings to reading speed. Striking. And I'm so glad to have come across her and found people looking at these real quality of life issues. And I've been talking about dry eye for many years now and always mentioning quality of life, but without putting necessarily a lot of thought to it. And doctors sometimes are hesitant to embrace dry eye in their practices. And there's typically some sort of a why moment that might occur that gets them to do it. For me, it was exactly what you mentioned, the impact that the tear film has on our patient's vision. That's really the driver. So kudos to you for embracing reading speed and really looking at these things. And that's just music to my ears to hear about addressing visual function and quality of life issues. So how you mentioned that we're talking about something that's unique. Why another cyclosporine, Sonja?
Our technology makes this cyclosporine unique. So cyclosporine is actually an ideal molecule to treat dry eye. So it has a dual mode of action. It has a direct anti-inflammatory portion, and it has also an immunomodulatory portion. With that, it interferes really with key factors of the disease. With our technology, we bring the cyclosporine directly to the ocular surface. And because it's water-free, we can solve the cyclosporine without any other excipients, and the bioavailability is much higher. This formulation really makes the difference, because there are myths around of cyclosporine. So people believe that The onset of effect takes months. But as mentioned before, we could show with our formulation, the onset of effect is much faster. We see the reduction in corneal staining already after 2 weeks. And the other myth around cyclosporine is that it burns and stings. But in our trials, we have not seen that. So our instillation site reactions were below 2%. And that shows that the formulation is really a key factor for the efficacy and also tolerability of drugs and APIs in dry eye disease, or basically in ophthalmology in general.
And we had been talking earlier a little bit about your unique, again, I keep saying this unique technology, but it is, and a couple of things that it does in particular. You mentioned spreading. Can you elaborate on what is it that makes this spread so well and what's the significance of that?
Yeah, so it has a very low surface tension, and with that, it spreads significantly. With that, it also forms immediately a layer on top of the ocular surface, but with that, we can also adjust drop size. So basically, the drop size is 10 microliter and fits exactly to the anatomy of the eye. But what is also important is that it's water-free. Therefore, bacteria cannot grow, so it's completely preservative-free.
Interesting. And what do you anticipate will be the delivery system in terms of a multi-dose bottle or a bottle versus a vial?
Yeah, so it will be an easy-use multiple-dose bottle.
Interesting. So, no preservative.
No specific dropper because it's self-preserving and stable.
So CyclASol showed improved corneal staining as soon as 2 weeks. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then talk a little bit about reduction in symptoms. And you've used the SDI, the OSDI, which improved after 4 weeks. What was it on the symptoms?
It was at 4 weeks. So for the OSDI, we actually have not seen statistical significance. We have seen statistical significance for the dryness score, so a visual analog scale for dryness. And okay. I think that's really the difficulty with symptoms. So the OSDI captures different symptoms. Some of them do not apply to patients. That introduces a lot of variability. What we've seen in our trials, and actually that is consistent with literature, that patients consistently report the feeling of dryness as their most severe symptom and consistently high. Other symptoms vary between patients, and so that was one of the learnings, and potentially others have done a similar learning, that the dryness score is a good symptom for clinical trials.
Very good. We're always trying to chase down that ultimate patient questionnaire when we see patients in practice, and dry eye disease notorious for having a sign and symptom mismatch. So I think that's a lot of the problem in the past for products meeting criteria. So what's next for CyclASol? What's the timeline look like for that?
So CyclASol is now in phase 3. So we started the studies, the efficacy study in December last year. This efficacy study will go over in an open label safety extension study, which started at the beginning of this year. We plan to complete both studies within this year and have top-line data by end of the year, and plan the NDA to be submitted mid-2020.
Very good. And let's talk briefly about your other study called CCASE, which looked at evaporative dry patients with normal Schirmer scores, but increased tear film or decreased tear film breakup time. Can you talk a little bit about the NOV03 product?
Yeah, the NOV03 product is licensed to Bausch & Health now. It's also in phase 3. They completed their first confirmatory study recently. The other one is running. And I think this product is unique because it targets evaporative dry eye associated with MGD. And the mode of action is that it forms a stable layer with the lipids in the tear film and thereby preventing evaporation. But in addition, it can penetrate into meibomian glands and potentially solubilize sucked meibom.
Impressive. Strengthening lipid layer, all that very useful, of course, to our patients in terms of stabilizing a tear film. We want a tear film that falls apart normally versus irregular tear film breakup, which can adversely affect vision. And anything that we can do to assist our patients with a potential long-term liquefaction of meibom versus the hot compresses constantly, I think would be a big help. The compresses are tough for patients to continue with. Sonja, is there anything else that you wanted to tell us about Novaliq today?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations on 2 papers being accepted by Cornea with apparently very impressive results. So I wish you the best of luck. And how can doctors find out more about Novaliq or keep on top of your research?
Yeah, please visit our homepage.
Novaliq.com. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah.
All right. Very good. Well, I want to thank you again so much for joining us today, and I wish you the best of luck with that.
Yes, thanks for having me. It was a great pleasure talking to you.
You as well.
This has been your Industry Spotlight with Dr. Scott Schechter. Thanks for listening. You can find us online at www.ocularsurfaceacademy.com, all major podcast platforms, and YouTube.